I want to come back to a topic we were touching on in the first panel too, which is this idea of producers, consumers. Matthias, one of the things we were talking about is how do you incentivize producers to care how they affect a data and analytics ecosystem? And I think part of this was around buzzword like data contracts these days. I mean, that's a mechanism to document and potentially enforce that. But ultimately, if I'm a developer that needs to push a business critical application to production, I don't really care if I get an impact analysis in my pull request. Like, for data downstream, like I need to make this change. So like, what is the incentive, or how do you bridge that gap? Do you have those conversations when you're, going in and talking about Snowflake?
Yeah, certainly that comes up in conversations with clients who are looking at these things. So I think there are multiple things, and there are multiple different types of incentives here that can work together, right? So, for example, one thing that I have observed is there are certainly data producers in an organization that also happen to be data consumers, right? And in that case, well, they will see the benefit of something like data contracts, right? They will see the improved reliability of the quality of the data that they are consuming. So that makes them more likely to agree to do the same for the data that they are producing for their respective data consumers, right? The second thing, specifically when you ask about data contracts, I think is that a data contract is not just, an additional obligation on the data producer. Depending on how you implement it, it can also be a tool for the data producer to define some terms and conditions on the usage of the data, right? For how long can it be used, for which purposes, may or may not be used, and so on. And having some more formal way to express that can actually be very appealing to data producers. So that may be an incentive to buy into the concept of a data contract, right? But then, ultimately, if in the company, it's if it's the right thing to do, then sometimes you can reason with people and make them do what's right. And ultimately, if these things are sufficiently important to a company, and that's not just specific to data products, but to other parts of data ownership and responsibility, ultimately it can make sense to also put it in people's job descriptions, what their goals are for the quarter, for the year, for their manager, for their director, what they get rewarded on, right? And if manager makes it visible, if the management makes it visible, then it's important that people get rewarded if they do this well, right? So the tone from the top is also very important there to make that change happen over time.
Yeah, I think that's really good. There's an element of transparency, like putting it out there and making a producer who is the consumer understand the connection helps, that there's the actual incentive of, like job incentive. But then there's just cultural too. I mean,
yep.
You have to care about it.
It's a culture change, of course, and that takes time, takes effort, takes a lot of communication.
Gotcha. Yeah. Abhi, I think, did you want to say something? I saw you were.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can speak from experience that meeting the incentives of product organizations, engineering organizations specifically, what I've found in multiple organizations is for product organizations, it looks a lot like what Matthias said, right? That these product organizations are actually data consumers as well, and creating these data products, well, they themselves are actually going to be the first and best consumer of their very own data products, right? And that kind of thinking. I mean, forget the whole ecosystem, right? We don't even need to go that far. We don't even need to, impress on them that you're you're a good citizen here in this ecosystem, and other people are going to be good citizens back to you. Quite simply, if you want visibility yourself, you need data products essentially that you can consume, and if you can start that feedback loop, in their own team, I think that is a powerful incentive to get PMs and product organizations on board. For the engineering organizations, look, I've found that the kind of move to data products, move to data mesh, the move to domains can be very clarifying for the kind of reverse Conway law effects can be very clarifying for re-architecting and restructuring teams and re-architecting boundaries in production applications. This most acutely happens when an organization is moving to a service-oriented architecture or microservices. We all know that there's these kind of analogies that we can make between the SOA world, the microservices world, and the data mesh world. I've seen now in multiple organizations where data mesh thinking, domain thinking, data contract thinking helps to actually clarify how an organization should go about implementing a SOA transition, what the domain events should be, what the domain boundaries should be, right? How the system should be architected. And so, these feedback loops, right? We talked about the feedback loops going from engineering to data, but the feedback loop can absolutely go the other way. And whether it's SOA or not, whether it's microservices or not, even just thinking about the modularization of your code base, right? Thinking about the surface areas within your code base, that can be clarified and that can help engineers move faster. And that's possible, if you start in this kind of Switzerland of the data mesh, right? Of the data platform.
Yeah, I mean, you just answered my question from the last panel where I said, I think I asked Prakalpa first, like, what is this now changing, or should it be changing more of our operational workflows? I think what you just said makes sense, which is thinking about data and the domain-driven design of the data architecture probably will start to shape how you actually build out your applications or align to your applications or what events we're capturing. So it kind of touched the producer in that way.